I always used to think that the people who would protect my dreams the most would be my own parents. I believed that when life got tough, they would stand behind me, lift me up, and remind me that I was meant for something bigger. But the night I turned 17, everything I thought I knew about love, family, and loyalty shattered in a single conversation at our kitchen table. It was the moment I learned that sometimes the people you trust the most can disappoint you in ways you never imagined. I remember sitting there, tired from a long day at school, excited because I had been working on my college applications. I had spent months building my portfolio, studying for exams, and pushing myself because I wanted to become a doctor. It wasn't just a career goal, it was a dream that had kept me grounded through years of ups and downs. My parents always said they had been saving for my college fund since I was a baby. It was supposed to be my ticket out of the stress, the struggle, and the small life everyone assumed I would settle for. But that evening when my mom and dad asked me to sit down for a family talk, something inside me already felt uneasy. My older brother, Marcus, was leaning against the counter with this weird smile on his face, like he already knew something I didn't. And when my parents finally spoke, the words didn't just hurt, they burned. They told me they had decided to give my college fund to Marcus, for his wedding. At first, I honestly thought it was a joke. I even laughed a little, waiting for them to start laughing too. But they didn't. Their faces were serious. Calm. As if they had already decided that my future was an optional luxury, while my brother's wedding was some kind of emergency that needed saving. My mom tried to explain it in the softest tone she could. My dad added that family comes first. Marcus shrugged and said something like, "It's only fair, I'm starting a life. You still have plenty of time." And in that moment, something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a small, painful snap that changed everything about how I saw them. All I could think was, how is his wedding more important than my education? They told me I could always take loans. That I could work part-time. That smart people always figure something out. And that maybe becoming a doctor wasn't meant for people like us anyway. They said it gently, but the message still cut deep. I went to my room that night and cried quietly, not because I was weak, but because I had never felt so invisible in my own home. It felt like my dreams had been traded away without my permission. Like my future didn't matter if it messed with someone else's comfort. But after the tears dried, something inside me changed. Determination, anger, ambition, whatever name you want to give it, rose in a way I had never felt before. If they weren't going to invest in my dreams, I was going to invest in myself. If they didn't believe in me, I was going to become someone they would never be able to ignore. The next day, I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't cry. I just started planning. I found my first job 2 weeks later, working evenings at a small grocery store near my school. Then came my second job tutoring local kids. And when that wasn't enough, I picked up a third job cleaning offices on weekends. I was exhausted every single day, but the idea of quitting never crossed my mind. Every hour I worked, every dollar I earned, felt like me pulling myself 1 inch closer to the life I wanted. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fun. But it was mine. I would come home late at night and study until my eyes burned. I did homework during short breaks and wrote college essays in the car while waiting for my shift to start. Sometimes I felt like breaking down. Sometimes I felt jealous of kids who had parents cheering them on. But every time I thought about what happened at that kitchen table, I remembered exactly why I couldn't give up. Meanwhile, Marcus continued planning his big wedding. Suddenly the house was always filled with flowers, cake samples, fabric swatches, and relatives acting like the event was the greatest thing that had ever happened. No one noticed how tired I was. No one asked how I was paying for everything I needed. No one cared that I barely slept anymore. But I kept working, kept saving, and kept pushing through the long nights and early mornings. I didn't want them to feel guilty. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to build something for myself, something no one could take away. Eventually, I got accepted into a pre-med program, then medical school. And slowly, the dream they thought was too big for me became something real. But that part of the story comes later. This introduction is about the moment everything changed, about the pain that sparked the journey. Because the truth is, even achieving success doesn't erase the hurt. Family wounds run deep, and when trust breaks, it leaves marks that don't fade easily. You move on. You grow. You heal. But you never really forget. And now, all these years later, after working 3 jobs, graduating with honors, becoming a doctor, and building a stable life for myself, I'm standing at another turning point. A moment I never expected. A moment that brings everything full circle. Because last week, my parents called me. Not to apologize. Not to celebrate me. Not even to check how I was doing. No. They called because Marcus needs something. Something big. Something only I can provide. And as I listened to them talk, almost the same way they did that night at the kitchen table, I felt that old pressure trying to wrap around my chest again. The same expectation that I should sacrifice because family comes first. The same assumption that my success belonged to all of them, not just to me. But this time, I'm not the helpless 17-year-old who lost everything in a single conversation. I'm not the quiet kid who cried alone in their room. I'm not the dreamer who had to fight for every inch of progress. I'm different now. Stronger. Wiser. And I know that the decision I make next will change everything. The question is, what do I owe them? And what do I owe myself? Because when they told me exactly what Marcus needs from me, I felt my whole world freeze. And that's where this part of the story begins. When my parents ended the call, I just sat there for a long time, staring at the phone like it still had something else to say. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, slow and steady, almost mocking the way my heart was beating too fast. It felt unreal, how easily they brushed past everything that had happened, how casually they told me what Marcus needed, like the past had been wiped clean and replaced with a new list of expectations. I kept thinking about that night years ago, the night my college fund disappeared, and how that one choice shaped everything that came after. It was wild how life had come back around in a full circle, except now I wasn't the kid with empty pockets and no power. I was someone different, someone they had not expected me to become. As I sat there, I felt myself drifting back through time, remembering the days that shaped me before everything went wrong. Before the wedding took my future. Before I learned the kind of loyalty my family believed in. I grew up in a home where love was real, but it wasn't always fair. My parents worked hard, but they were also stuck in old beliefs. Beliefs that said the oldest son carried the family's future, that boys were investments and girls were expected to adjust. They never said it in a harsh way. They never confessed it openly. But the truth lived between their words, in the choices they made, and in the attention they gave. Marcus had always been the golden child. The one with the easy smile, the one teachers praised even when he barely tried, the one relatives compared everyone else to. If he wanted something, somehow money appeared, time opened up, and the world shifted for him. It wasn't that he was a bad person. He just grew up believing that everything would work out in his favor. And when life constantly confirms that, why would he think differently? I wasn't jealous, not at first. As a kid, I loved him. He was my big brother, the one who walked me to school, the one who fixed my bike chain, the one who told me stories at night when I was scared. But as we got older, it became obvious that his footsteps were easier to follow because the path was cleared for him. The world gave him shortcuts. Mine was a maze. Still, I never blamed him. At least not until the wedding. But even before that day, looking back, the signs were always there. When my parents talked about college, they talked about options for Marcus, but they talked about maybe for me. When he came home with bad grades, they blamed the teacher. When I did, they blamed my attitude. They weren't cruel, just conditioned. They didn't see how their decisions slowly built a wall between me and the love I used to feel so easily. And yet, through everything, I held on to my dream. Becoming a doctor wasn't just a career. It was the one thing I felt truly connected to. I used to spend hours reading medical stories online, watching videos about surgeries, learning vocabulary I couldn't even pronounce. I'd imagine myself in a white coat, helping people, making a difference, being someone my younger self would be proud of. It gave me direction. It gave me hope. Which is why the night they took my college fund broke something inside me. But it also created something new. After that conversation, when I started working 3 jobs, I learned more about life than any classroom could have taught me. I met people who had nothing yet gave kindness freely. I met people who were exhausted but still pushed through their days because they had families depending on them. I saw resilience in faces I passed every day, mothers working night shifts, teenagers supporting siblings, older men cleaning floors while humming softly under their breath. Their stories became part of me. And somewhere in that struggle, in those countless tired mornings and late nights, I began to understand who I was becoming. I wasn't just chasing a dream anymore, I was rebuilding myself from the ground up. Every paycheck, every hour, every moment was proof that I didn't need anyone's permission to succeed. Yes, I was tired. Yes, sometimes I felt like crumbling. But I had found a strength I never knew lived inside me. When I finally got into college, I didn't celebrate with a big announcement. I didn't go to my parents' room to show them the acceptance letter. I sat alone at the kitchen table early in the morning before my shift, and smiled quietly to myself. It was my victory. My moment. My proof. No one could take credit for it except me. Even then, my parents didn't fully understand what I was doing. They knew I got in, but they didn't understand how. They assumed there must have been scholarships or help somewhere, and yes, I had some support, but they never asked about the sacrifices behind it. They just said they were proud, and I accepted the words even though a part of me wished they had asked deeper questions. Medical school was even harder. The workload, the pressure, the constant feeling that one mistake could ruin everything, it pushed me to limits I didn't know existed. But I kept going, fueled by every memory of what I'd lost and every dream of the life I wanted. By the time I finished my residency, I wasn't the same person anymore. I was stronger, more focused, more aware of who I wanted in my life and who I didn't. I learned to set boundaries. I learned the difference between forgiveness and allowing people to repeat their mistakes. And I learned that love without respect wasn't love at all. Still, I never fully cut my parents off. We talked on holidays, shared small updates, kept things polite. But the closeness we once had never returned. It was like we were learning how to be a family again, but from a distance. I tried not to hold grudges. I tried to move on. But some hurt lives deep under the skin. Which brings me back to last week. The phone call that pulled all those old wounds back into the light. My parents didn't waste time with small talk. They didn't ask how work was or how I'd been feeling. They just went straight into it like they had practiced the conversation before dialing my number. They said Marcus had been going through something serious. They said he needed help. They said I was the only one who could give it. Their voices were calm, but I could hear the strain under each word. The kind of tone that tells you something big is sitting between the lines, something they don't want to say out loud. As they kept talking, my stomach tightened because the way they were building up to it felt too familiar, just like that night years ago when they softened their voices before dropping the news about my college fund. A part of me wanted to interrupt them. A part of me wanted to hang up. But I didn't. I listened. And the more they talked, the more the tension grew, twisting in the space between us. I kept thinking, what could Marcus possibly need now? Why does it have to be me? Why did they call after all these years only for this? But the real question was the one rising quietly in the back of my mind. What am I supposed to do when the same people who once broke me are asking me to save someone else? I didn't have the answer. Not yet. But when they finally told me exactly what Marcus needed, I felt the air leave my lungs. And I realized this story was far from over. When they finally said the words, it felt like the room around me stopped breathing. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't some shocking twist you hear in movies. It was simple, quiet, and heavy enough to make the floor under me feel unsteady. My mom said Marcus was sick. Not just tired or stressed, really sick. And he needed a medical procedure that had to be done soon. They explained it slowly, carefully, like they were afraid I would hang up if they rushed. I listened, trying to keep my voice steady, but inside my thoughts were running everywhere, hitting walls and bouncing back just as fast. They said I was the only one in the family with the right qualifications and resources to help him. They said I had the connections, the knowledge, the ability to move things faster. And the way they said it, it didn't feel like a request. It felt like history was repeating itself in a different shape. The same quiet pressure. The same unspoken expectation that I should step up because family sticks together. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just kept listening, searching for the part where they would tell me this wasn't my problem alone. Searching for the part where they acknowledged the years I fought without their help. But that part never came. After the call ended, I sat with the weight of their words, replaying everything. Marcus was sick. He needed help. And despite everything that had happened, I couldn't pretend it meant nothing to me. But the conflict inside me felt deep, like two versions of myself pulling in opposite directions. One part of me remembered the brother who used to hold my hand on the walk to school, who shared his snacks even when he pretended he didn't want to. The brother who carried me on his shoulders so I could see fireworks above the crowd. Those memories were real, warm, and impossible to erase. But the other part of me remembered the man he became later. The one who didn't question taking my college fund, who didn't defend me when I cried in my room behind a closed door, who didn't notice the hard years I dragged myself through. The man who got a wedding paid for with my future. The man who never apologized. Both versions existed. And now I had to face them. In the days after the call, I tried to keep my mind busy. I threw myself into work, checking on patients, handling charts, moving through my routine like nothing had changed. But every quiet moment, every pause, brought the same questions flooding back. What did he need? What exactly happened to him? Why did no one tell me sooner? And why, after all these years, did they still expect me to carry the biggest weight? My coworkers noticed I was distracted. One of them, Dr. Lawson, caught me staring at a file longer than necessary and nudged me with a joking smile. I tried to laugh, but she studied me carefully. "You all right?" she asked. I told her I was fine, just tired, but even I didn't believe the words. She didn't push, but I saw the concern in her eyes. It reminded me that I lived two different versions of myself. The strong doctor everyone relied on, and the quiet kid inside who still carried wounds no one saw. That same week, something unexpected happened that complicated everything even more. I got a message from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Leah. We had grown up together, inseparable during our early teens, but when things got messy at home, I pushed a lot of people away. She reached out saying she was in town and wanted to catch up. At first, I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure I had the emotional space for old memories resurfacing. But something in me needed a break from thinking about my family, so I agreed. When I saw her again, it felt like opening a window in a room that had been closed too long. She looked the same in spirit, bright eyes, warm energy, the kind of presence that made everything feel a little lighter. We talked about life, work, the strange way time moved. She told me about her own struggles, her own victories. And then she asked about my family. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because I didn't know where to begin. Eventually, I told her the story I had never said out loud before, the college fund, the wedding, the 3 jobs, the silence that grew between me and my parents. She listened without interrupting, without trying to fix anything. And when I finished, she just placed her hand over mine and said, "I'm sorry you went through that alone." It was simple, but those words cracked something open inside me. Maybe because no one had ever said them before. Not my parents. Not Marcus. Not even myself. Hearing it from someone who had nothing to gain, it softened something I didn't know was still hard. But when I told her about the phone call and what my parents wanted, Leah leaned back, her face shifting into something unreadable. She didn't say much at first. She just asked one question: "Do you trust them this time?" The question hit me like cold water because I didn't have an answer. And the fact that I didn't have one scared me. Later that night, after we said goodbye, I lay awake thinking about everything. Trust, family, responsibility, and the confusing place where all those things overlap. I thought about Marcus, who he was, who he became, and who he might be now. People change. Sometimes for better. Sometimes for worse. I didn't know which version of him I would be helping. There was another layer to all this too, the public side of being a doctor. Every decision I made, especially one involving someone close to me, had to be handled carefully. Ethically. Professionally. I couldn't let emotions cloud medical judgment. And I didn't want my family pulling me into something that could risk my career. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let anything jeopardize what I built from scratch. But the biggest conflict wasn't about rules or career. It was about the pain that still lived in the corners of my memories. The part of me that wanted to stand strong and protect my peace. The part of me that wanted to show them I wasn't the child they could walk over anymore. The part of me that wasn't sure if helping them now would open old wounds I spent years closing. And yet, there was another truth I couldn't ignore. He was still my brother. The same brother who once promised he'd always be there for me. So I found myself stuck between the past and the present, between wanting to protect myself and wanting to do the right thing. Every answer I reached for twisted into another question. Every thought felt heavier than the one before. And just when I thought the situation couldn't get more complicated, I received another call. Not from my parents. Not from Marcus. From someone I didn't recognize. Someone who claimed to know the entire story. Someone who said there was more to Marcus's situation than my family had told me. Someone who said I needed to hear the truth before I made any decision. And with that call, the whole situation shifted again, in a way I never expected. The voice on the phone belonged to a man who spoke quietly, like he didn't want anyone around him to hear. At first, I thought it was a scam or someone trying to mess with me, but the way he said Marcus's name, carefully, almost respectfully, made my heartbeat slow down and then speed up all at once. He introduced himself as Daniel, someone who had worked with my brother in the last few years. I didn't recognize the name, but something in his tone made me straighten up, like whatever he was about to say wasn't something I could ignore. He didn't jump into the details. Instead, he kept asking if I was alone, if I was able to talk freely, if I was willing to hear him out. And honestly, I wasn't sure. But curiosity mixed with fear pushed me to say yes. He said what my parents told me wasn't the full truth. That Marcus's situation was more complicated, more urgent, and that keeping me in the dark wouldn't help anyone, not even Marcus. Those words sat heavy in my chest. I stepped outside into the cool night air, pacing slowly on the porch while he talked. The street was quiet, the sky dark, but my mind felt loud with questions. Daniel said he didn't want to scare me, but he also didn't want to lie. He said that Marcus had been dealing with health issues long before the recent crisis. Issues he hid from the whole family. Issues that changed the course of his life when none of us were looking. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. I didn't want to hear more, but I also couldn't hang up. He said Marcus dropped out of a job he never told the family about. He said Marcus had been trying to handle everything alone, not because he didn't trust us, but because he felt like he was already the disappointment after everything that happened years ago. That part hit me differently, like someone had taken a memory and flipped it upside down. I always thought I was the one carrying pain from the past. I never imagined Marcus carried any too. But then Daniel said something even more unsettling. He claimed my parents didn't tell me the full story because they were afraid I wouldn't help if I knew how deep the trouble ran. That they were protecting Marcus, but also protecting themselves from the guilt of what they'd done years ago. He said they thought I'd shut them out completely if they pushed the truth on me all at once. So they softened the story, hoping I'd step in before asking too many questions. I could feel the anger building in my chest, but right beside it was confusion, worry, fear, all tangled up like knots I couldn't undo. Before I could ask anything, Daniel said he couldn't talk long. He urged me to meet him in person, somewhere neutral, somewhere quiet. He said he had proof of everything he mentioned. Medical papers, records, messages. Things Marcus never wanted anyone to see because he didn't want to look weak, especially not in front of me. The call ended with a soft, almost pleading request. Please talk to him before it's too late. I stood there for a long time even after the call disconnected, staring into the darkness like the answers were hidden somewhere in the quiet street. The air felt colder now, heavier. I kept replaying the last few seconds of the call, wondering if meeting a stranger about my brother was reckless or necessary. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was racing in circles, colliding with memories, questions, fears. I kept seeing Marcus's face the way it used to be, smiling, confident, carefree, and trying to match it with the image of someone struggling in silence. It didn't fit, but sometimes the people we think we know the best are the ones hiding the most. The next morning I went to work tired, but no one needed to say anything. I felt the tension hanging off me like a shadow. I tried to focus on my patients, tried to stay calm, but every time I washed my hands, every time I changed gloves, every time I walked down a hallway, the same thought kept hitting me. Why didn't he tell me? Later that day, when I finally stepped out of the hospital, the weight of everything came crashing down again. I stood by my car but couldn't bring myself to unlock it. My hands were shaking and I didn't know if it was fear or anger or both. That's when Leah showed up unexpectedly. She had stopped by to bring me lunch earlier, but I was with a patient, so she left it with someone at the front desk. Now she was leaning against her car, watching me with the same worried look she had before. She didn't force me to talk. She just asked if I wanted to sit. I nodded. We sat in her car with the engine off, the windows slightly open, the quiet settling around us like a blanket. She listened as I explained the call and everything Daniel said. I didn't hide anything. I didn't sugarcoat it. I just let the words spill out the way they needed to. And when I finished, she looked at me with this expression that said she was trying to see past the story into the parts one wasn't saying, the parts that hurt the most. She finally asked, "Do you think you're ready to face him? Not the idea of him, but the real him?" I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I couldn't keep guessing. I needed to see Marcus face to face. I needed to hear his truth from him, not from someone else. And I needed to know if I was about to repeat the history that once broke me, or rewrite it. So I agreed to meet Daniel. We arranged a time, a place, a quiet cafe on the edge of town where no one would interrupt. As the hours ticked by before the meeting, my anxiety grew. My heartbeat stayed fast. My hands stayed cold. I didn't know what I was walking into, and the uncertainty pressed onto my chest like a weight. When I arrived at the cafe, I saw Daniel sitting near the window, a folder on the table in front of him. He didn't look dangerous. If anything, he looked tired, eyes heavy, hands tense, as if he'd been carrying this secret for too long. He stood when I walked in, offering a small, hesitant greeting. I sat. He pushed the folder toward me. Inside were documents, medical reports, hospital notes, treatment plans. And right there, highlighted under one of the reports, was the truth I hadn't expected. Marcus had been hiding his health problems for years. He had been getting treatments quietly. He had been trying to work through pain, refusing help, refusing support. And worst of all, he had been getting worse. But Daniel wasn't finished. He said something else, something that made my stomach drop. Marcus didn't just need help. He needed someone he trusted. Someone with medical knowledge. Someone who could make a decision for him if things got worse. And in his file, under emergency contact, under the section for trusted decision maker, he had written my name. Not our parents. Not his wife. Me. The sibling he had once unintentionally hurt. The sibling he assumed hated him. The sibling he still believed in. My throat tightened. I tried to breathe, but it felt shallow. Everything around me blurred as the weight of that truth settled on my chest. Daniel watched me quietly before saying the thing that pushed the tension to its highest point. You're the only one he'll open up to. And if you don't talk to him soon, it might be too late. I felt the world tilt. Because now I had to face him. And the next choice I made would change everything. Here is the continuation written exactly as you requested. Smooth, human-centric, suspenseful, SEO-friendly, and safe for YouTube. For a long moment, the room felt too still, almost like the air itself was holding its breath. Everything that had just unfolded left a heavy silence trailing behind it, one thick enough to unsettle even the strongest person. But before anyone could fully process what had happened, a sharp knock echoed through the hallway, 3 slow taps followed by a fourth that sounded almost impatient. It wasn't the kind of knock that came from a neighbor or a delivery driver. It felt intentional, calculated, and immediately everyone glanced at each other with the same uneasy realization. Whatever they thought was over, wasn't. When the door creaked open, it revealed a tall black man in a charcoal jacket, someone no one recognized at first glance. His eyes scanned the room with a calmness that instantly made the atmosphere tense again. But the real shock came when he stepped forward and quietly said he had information. Information that completely changed everything they thought they knew. He wasn't there by accident. He had been following the situation for weeks, watching, waiting, and now he had chosen this exact moment to reveal the truth he'd been holding. The tension deepened as he explained that the conflict everyone thought had been sparked by a personal betrayal or misunderstanding wasn't just emotional drama. It was part of a much larger plan that none of them had seen coming. Someone in the family had been pulling strings, orchestrating moments, manipulating conversations, and planting small seeds of doubt just to escalate tensions. All the arguments, the sudden changes in behavior, the strange coincidences, they hadn't been coincidences at all. Someone wanted this chaos. Someone needed it. And that person was still close. The shock rippled through the room. Every relationship, every memory, every conversation suddenly felt tainted by uncertainty. Even the strongest bonds felt unstable. Faces that once inspired trust now held shadows of suspicion. And the stranger's presence only amplified the urgency. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calmness carried a seriousness that made every word feel like a warning. As he continued, he pulled out a small folder, thin, worn, but powerful. Inside were messages, printed screenshots, timestamps, and notes that didn't just hint at deception. They proved it. Someone had been creating fake accounts. Someone had been sending misleading messages. Someone had been recording conversations and twisting them into something they weren't. It wasn't just conflict anymore, it was strategy. A chill moved through the room as each detail unfolded. This wasn't just drama. This was a planned effort to break the family apart. And then came the second plot twist, quieter but much heavier. The stranger revealed that he wasn't alone in discovering the truth. There was another person involved, someone who had tried to warn them before but wasn't taken seriously. Someone who had been dismissed, misunderstood, brushed aside as overly emotional or dramatic. And now this person's warnings took on a new meaning, one that forced everyone to reevaluate their assumptions. The realization hit hard. The real danger wasn't the conflict they had already survived. The real danger was the conflict that was still being carefully built behind the scenes, by someone they trusted, someone who knew exactly how to manipulate their emotions and turn family against family. The room felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were inching closer. Every heartbeat felt louder. Every glance felt heavier. And just when the weight of the moment seemed almost too much, the stranger leaned closer and whispered the last thing anyone expected. The mastermind behind everything wasn't acting alone. There were 2 people involved. 2 people still operating quietly. 2 people pretending to be innocent while watching the damage unfold. That revelation didn't just raise the stakes. It shattered the foundation the family had been trying to rebuild. It meant the conflict wasn't just personal. It was layered, deliberate, and far from over. A new wave of suspense filled the room, deeper than before. This wasn't the climax yet, but it was the moment that pushed the story toward it. Every emotion sharpened. Every word mattered. Every move would now determine what happened next. And with the stranger standing there, waiting for their reaction, the family realized something they couldn't ignore. The next steps would reveal everything. The truth was no longer hiding, it was circling them, waiting to strike, and they had no choice but to face it head-on. The moment the stranger's words settled, the entire room shifted. It felt like everyone was standing on a thin line between truth and collapse. No one trusted their own assumptions anymore. Every face looked different now, every expression filled with silent questions. And yet, something in the atmosphere changed. Almost like everyone finally understood they couldn't run from this. They had to face whatever was coming. The stranger placed the folder on the table and stepped back, giving them space to breathe. Slowly they began going through the printed messages and screenshots, and the deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. The same writing style. The same timing patterns. The same way the fake accounts provoked small arguments that later exploded into bigger ones. It was all connected. The truth didn't hide between the lines, it was right there, bold and undeniable. And then the door quietly opened again. A black woman stepped inside, someone they all knew well, someone who had been there through every fight, every misunderstanding, every tense moment. Her expression was calm, almost too calm. When her eyes met theirs, there was no shock, no confusion. It was the kind of look people wear when they're done pretending. She walked closer, her footsteps slow and steady, and said she didn't plan for things to go this far. She admitted she had created some of the confusion, some of the lies, some of the setups, but not out of hate. She said she felt invisible in the family, unheard, and she thought stirring small issues would force people to finally pay attention to her. But someone else had taken advantage of her plan. They had pushed it much further than she ever wanted. She wasn't the mastermind, they were. The room froze again, but now the tension carried a new energy. This was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for, the moment when everything finally connected. With her confession came the final piece of the puzzle. The real mastermind wasn't someone distant. It wasn't the stranger. It wasn't an outsider watching from the shadows. It was someone even closer. Someone who always played peacemaker, someone who always stepped in at the right moment, someone who made sure they seemed innocent by always being the one to calm things down. All eyes shifted to the person sitting quietly in the corner. The black man who had always spoken softly. The one who always asked if everyone was okay. The one who never raised his voice, never picked a side, never caused any trouble. The one they trusted the most. When he finally looked up, something unreadable passed across his face, half guilt, half relief. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to run. He simply said he started manipulating things because he believed the family was drifting apart, and he thought forcing them through shared conflict would bring them closer. He believed chaos would make them unite. But once things escalated, he was too deep to pull back. The room erupted, not in yelling but in disbelief. No one expected the quiet one, the calm one, the one who always stood in the background. It felt like the floor tilted beneath them. This was the climax they didn't see coming, the moment everything finally snapped into place. But the twist wasn't over yet. As he explained himself, another truth slipped out. He had tried to stop things weeks ago. He tried to undo the damage by anonymously sending clues, hoping someone would piece it together before things got worse. The stranger who came earlier? He wasn't working against the family. He was helping the quiet man secretly, trying to bring the truth to light before everything broke. The final twist was simple but sharp. The people causing the chaos were the same people trying to fix it. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different, like a wound finally starting to close. They confronted him, listened to him, and for the first time in a long while, everyone spoke honestly. The anger was real, the hurt was real, but so was the relief. Everything was finally out in the open. No more secrets. No more hidden plans. No more pretending everything was fine. Slowly, painfully, the family began stitching the broken pieces back together. Apologies were made. Truths were accepted. Trust wasn't fully restored, but it wasn't shattered anymore either. It was fragile, but it was real. By the end of the night, the tension had softened. People breathed easier. The stranger left the folder on the table and promised he would return only if needed. The woman who started the smaller conflict stayed behind, helping clean up the mess, literally and emotionally. And the quiet man stood alone for a moment, knowing he had created the biggest storm of all, but also knowing it was finally over. Just when everyone thought the night had finally settled, a phone buzzed on the table. A notification popped up from an unknown number with a single line. "This isn't finished." Everyone exchanged a tense glance. A new twist. A new warning. A hint that someone else had been watching all along. The story wasn't reopening, but it left just enough mystery to remind them that truth has layers, and not all of them had been uncovered yet. And with that last message, the room fell silent once more, leaving a final shiver of suspense hanging in the air. The message on the phone screen held everyone in place for a few seconds that felt much longer. Even after everything that had come out, the lies, the hidden motives, the quiet confessions, this single line from an unknown number stirred a new ripple of fear. No one wanted another twist. No one wanted another storm. But this time, instead of panicking, they handled it differently. Everyone sat down together, calmer than before, and the quiet man who had caused so much of the chaos reached for the phone with steady hands. He opened the message thread, and to everyone's relief, it became clear immediately that the text wasn't connected to anything dangerous. It was just an automated reminder from an old service he had forgotten to cancel. He let out an embarrassed laugh, the kind that comes from finally breathing after holding your breath too long. For a moment, the whole room loosened. Some even chuckled softly. It wasn't funny, not really, but the tension had been so heavy that any reason to laugh felt like a blessing. The fear that something darker was lurking faded quickly, and for the first time that night, the atmosphere settled into something that felt real and warm. Once the confusion cleared, everyone knew the time had come to talk through everything, properly, honestly, without interruptions or defensiveness. The black woman who had first confessed to starting the smaller conflicts opened up more about why she had done what she did. She explained how long she had felt pushed aside, how often she tried to speak but felt overshadowed by louder voices or bigger personalities. Instead of asking for help, she had tried to force people to notice her by creating little sparks, not expecting them to turn into fire. She apologized deeply, not just with words but with the sincerity in her voice, and promised she would work on expressing herself in healthier ways. Then the quiet man finally shared everything he had been holding inside. He talked about how he had always been the one who avoided conflict, the one who tried to smooth things over even when he was hurting, the one who felt responsible for keeping the family together. He admitted he believed chaos would force unity, but he had never expected that things would spiral past his control. He talked about guilt, regret, and the weight of pretending to be the calm one when he was breaking inside. Hearing him express these truths without excuses shifted something in the room. No one excused his actions, but they understood him in a way they hadn't before. The stranger, who had stepped outside earlier, returned to gather his things. He wasn't a part of the family, but he had played a strange and unexpected role in helping everyone see the truth. Before leaving, he said that families sometimes break in quiet ways before they break loudly, and that the important thing was choosing to rebuild instead of pretending nothing happened. He didn't lecture them. He didn't judge them. He simply wished them peace and walked away, leaving a quiet sense of closure in his wake. After he left, there was a long silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. People were processing, taking in everything that had been revealed throughout the night. One by one, they began asking questions. Not sharp ones, not accusations, but gentle ones meant to understand. Questions that had been buried for years finally came out in the open. Why didn't you tell me you were hurting? Why did you think you had to handle it alone? Why didn't you trust us enough to share the truth? Slowly, honestly, they talked through every unanswered question. By the time midnight passed, the room had completely changed. It no longer felt like a battleground or a courtroom. It felt like a place where healing was finally possible. People apologized without being forced. People forgave without being pressured. The goal wasn't to pretend the problems never happened but to learn how to grow beyond them. The next few days weren't perfect. Healing never happens overnight. There were still moments of tension, awkward pauses, hesitant conversations. But this time, everyone faced those moments with intention. No more hiding behind silence or assumptions. No more letting small misunderstandings grow into big wounds. The family made a conscious effort to rebuild trust brick by brick. The black woman who had started the small conflicts joined a communication workshop to learn healthier ways to advocate for herself. She also began having weekly check-ins with one of the family members, not to rehash the past but to build a better connection moving forward. The quiet man began therapy, something he had avoided for years because he believed he needed to be the strong one. He learned that strength wasn't about control, it was about vulnerability and honesty. He shared parts of his journey with the family, allowing them to understand him more deeply. Everyone else began taking accountability for their own roles in the tension too. Family conflict isn't caused by one person. It builds from layers of unspoken emotions, unresolved issues, and hidden expectations. They acknowledged their own blind spots and worked on addressing them. Weeks later, they came together for a simple dinner. No big celebration, no dramatic speeches. Just food, conversation, and a sense of peace. The same house that had once felt heavy with secrets now felt open and warm. The same people who once avoided eye contact now laughed together with genuine ease. There were still scars. Nothing can erase what happened, but scars can be reminders of growth, not just pain. The final subplot that needed closure was the sense of trust. That didn't return instantly, but it grew slowly in moments. When someone expressed frustration honestly instead of hiding it, trust grew. When someone listened without jumping to conclusions, trust grew. When someone apologized without being defensive, trust grew. The process wasn't dramatic, but it was real. The unexpected twist no longer haunted them. Instead, it became a turning point, an unforgettable reminder of how easily misunderstandings can turn into chaos if people don't communicate openly. In the end, the family didn't just resolve the conflict, they transformed because of it. And as they sat together that evening, sharing food and soft laughter, they realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes life forces you into chaos so you can learn how to choose peace. Sometimes secrets break apart the surface so the truth can rise. And sometimes the quietest people are carrying the heaviest stories, stories that only come to light when the walls finally crack. The journey had been painful, messy, and unexpected. But it led them back to each other with a deeper understanding, stronger bonds, and a shared commitment to do better. And that was the real ending, not dramatic, not explosive, but human. A reminder that healing is possible, families can change, and even the darkest twists can lead to light when people choose honesty, compassion, and growth. The story ends here not because everything is perfect now, but because everyone finally chose to move forward, together.